It started with something so simple. A forgotten text, strange silence, a glance that lasted 1 second too long. Emily had always trusted the two people closest to her, her husband, Daniel, and her sister, Claire. They were her anchors in a world that sometimes felt like it was spinning too fast. She used to joke that Daniel and Claire got along better than she and Daniel did, and she loved that. It made her feel safe, like her family was unbreakable. Until one day, everything cracked. It was a Sunday morning when Emily first felt it, that quiet shift in the air, the kind you can't explain but can't ignore either. Daniel had gone out early for a jog, but his running shoes were still by the door, clean and dry. Claire had texted her the night before, "Don't wait up, I'm staying over at a friend's." At the time, Emily hadn't thought much of it. She trusted them. But now, standing in her kitchen, staring at the untouched coffee mugs, one blue, one white, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The silence felt heavy, like it was hiding something. She brushed it off at first. It's easy to be paranoid, right? Everyone's allowed an off day. But then, the small things started to add up, like puzzle pieces she didn't want to fit together. Daniel smiled less. He'd come home from work and seemed distant, lost in thought. Claire called less. Their daily chats turned into weekly check-ins, then silence. When they were all in the same room, they avoided each other's eyes. Or maybe they just avoided hers. It was as if every moment between them carried a secret conversation that Emily wasn't invited to hear. A private joke she didn't understand. A shared glance that held a universe of meaning she was shut out of. The air crackled with unspoken words, and she was left standing in the suffocating quiet. The hardest part wasn't the doubt, it was the love. Emily loved them both so deeply, and that's what made everything so cruel. She loved Daniel because he'd been there for her since college, the man who made her laugh when she cried, who held her hand through every storm, who built a life with her brick by brick. He was her foundation. And she loved Claire because she was her sister, her mirror, her childhood, her best friend. The girl who used to braid her hair and whisper dreams about their future when they were little. Claire was the one person in the world who was supposed to have her back, no matter what. And yet, something inside Emily whispered that one of them, or maybe both, were lying to her face. The first real crack appeared 2 weeks later. It was a moment that would change everything. Emily had left her phone at home one afternoon and needed to make a quick call, so she grabbed Daniel's. She didn't mean to snoop. She didn't even want to. But as she unlocked it, a notification popped up at the top of the screen. Her heart stopped. It was from Claire. Last night shouldn't have happened. Her hands started to shake, a tremor that ran all the way up her arms. She almost dropped the phone. For a long moment, she just stood there, staring, frozen. Every heartbeat felt like thunder in her chest, so loud she thought it would shatter her ribs. With trembling fingers, she tapped the message, her breath caught in her throat. And there it was. Daniel's reply sent just moments before. "We both know it wasn't just last night." She read it again and again, her mind refusing to process the words. She hoped it was a mistake, a typo, a horrible misunderstanding. But the words didn't fade. They stayed. They burned into her memory, searing a permanent scar on her heart. The world around her seemed to tilt on its axis. The kitchen she was standing in, the home they had built together, suddenly felt alien, like a movie set. That night, she didn't confront them. The words were trapped in her throat, choked by a mix of shock and rage. She sat at the dinner table, a perfect portrait of a happy wife, pretending everything was normal. She listened as Daniel talked about a project at work. She watched as Claire laughed over a glass of wine, her voice bright and cheerful. Every sound felt wrong, every smile, every word was a lie. How could they sit there and act like this? How could they look her in the eye and pretend nothing had happened? She watched Daniel reach for the breadbasket. His hand brushed Claire's just for a second. It was almost nothing, but Emily saw it. That flicker of shared history in their eyes, that flash of guilt. In that single fleeting moment, the world she'd spent 10 years building began to collapse, quietly and visibly, like a house crumbling from the inside out. There was no grand explosion, just a silent, devastating implosion of her reality. She went to bed early that night, claiming a headache. Daniel joined her later, his arm draping around her waist like he always did. But his touch felt different, heavy, false. It wasn't a comfort, it was a weight. She stared into the dark, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The man beside her, the man she had promised her life to, was a stranger now. The sister she'd trusted with every secret was a ghost haunting her home. And the home that once felt warm and safe, her sanctuary, now felt like a stage of cold, empty stage where everyone was playing a part, pretending not to know the devastating truth that hung between them. Emily knew she couldn't stay silent forever. The truth was a wound that would only fester and grow if she kept it buried. It was a poison spreading through her veins. But how do you confront the people who are supposed to love you most? How do you survive the kind of betrayal that tears apart not just a marriage, but an entire family? A betrayal from the two pillars of her life. She didn't have an answer. Not yet. But lying there in the dark, feeling the cold space grow between her and her husband, she knew one thing with chilling certainty. This was only the beginning. Because sometimes, the people we trust to protect our hearts are the ones who break them first. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content. Your support means the world. Take care. The morning after she saw the messages, I couldn't look either of them in the eyes. Daniel was humming in the kitchen, just like he always did. My sister Claire was sitting at the counter, scrolling through her phone. It looked so ordinary, like any other morning. But for me, it felt like standing in the middle of a lie. My mind kept replaying every word from that message thread. Every single word. I tried to convince myself that maybe there was an explanation, and maybe last night meant something innocent, a misunderstanding, a coincidence. But deep down, my heart already knew. You see, trust doesn't break all at once. It unravels, quietly. Over the next few days, I became an observer in my own life. I watched the way Daniel avoided my gaze when he came home late. I noticed how Claire's laughter felt forced, how her eyes would dart away too quickly whenever I entered the room. It was like watching a movie I never wanted to be in, and I didn't know how to make it stop. There were moments when I almost convinced myself I was imagining it all, that maybe I was just being paranoid. That maybe real love, true love, could survive anything. But then I'd see it again. A quick glance between them, a whispered comment. The silent electricity in the air. My heart would break all over again. One afternoon, I decided to visit Claire at her apartment unannounced. I brought coffee, pretending it was just a sisterly drop-by. But inside, I was searching for anything that would prove me wrong. Claire opened the door, surprised but smiling. "Hey, this is a nice surprise." I smiled back, but it didn't reach my eyes. "I was in the neighborhood," I said softly. "Thought I'd stop by." As we sat down, my eyes scanned her apartment, and then I saw it. Daniel's favorite brand of cologne was sitting on her dresser. His jacket, the one I bought him for his birthday, was hanging by the door. My stomach turned to ice. "Daniel was here?" I asked, forcing my voice to sound casual. Claire froze for just half a second too long. "Oh, yeah. He dropped off some papers. For your taxes, I think." It was a good lie. Quick, practiced. Too quick. I didn't confront her then. Not yet. Instead, I watched her carefully. The way her hand shook slightly as she poured the coffee. The way her smile would vanish the moment I looked away. The truth was right there, sitting between us, invisible but undeniable. We talked for an hour, about nothing and about everything. Old memories, childhood stories, our mother's old garden. And the whole time, I felt my heart splitting in two. One part was still desperate to believe in my sister. The other was bracing for the inevitable. When I finally left, Claire hugged me tightly. "Love you," she whispered. I whispered back, "Yeah, love you too." But the words tasted like ash in my mouth. That night, Daniel came home late again. I sat by the window, the lights off, pretending to read. I listened as he quietly placed his keys on the counter. His footsteps hesitated, as if he could feel me awake in the dark. Then he spoke, his voice soft. "Hey, you're still up?" "Yeah," I said, not looking up. "Long day," he nodded, sitting beside me. "Just work. You know how it is." I turned to him then and really looked at him. There were traces of something in his face, guilt, maybe, or was it fear? It hurt me, because I still loved him. Even now, even after everything I'd seen. I wanted to scream, to throw the truth in his face, to make him see what he'd done to me, to us. But instead, I just said quietly, "You're working too hard. Don't burn out." He smiled weakly, kissed my forehead, and went to shower. And when I heard the water running, I finally let myself cry. The next morning, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My eyes were tired, my smile was gone. But there was something new there. A quiet fire that hadn't been there before. Resolve. I couldn't live like this anymore. Not in silence, not in doubt. I needed the truth, even if it was going to break me completely. Sometimes the hardest part of betrayal isn't losing the people you love. It's losing the version of yourself that still believed they would never hurt you. I'm not. And as I stood there, in the stillness of my own home, surrounded by the ghosts of love and lies, I knew my next step would change everything. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more. Your support means the world. We'll see you in the next one. The days passed like a thick fog drifting through an empty street, silent, cold, and seemingly endless. I moved through my life in fragments, just doing what I had to do, saying what was expected of me. But on the inside, my heart felt like it was slowly unraveling. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Every single time Daniel's phone buzzed, I froze. Every time my sister, Claire, called, my stomach would just turn itself into knots, and the worst part of it all, the pretending that everything was fine when I could feel the very ground splitting right beneath my feet. Last Friday night, Daniel told me he had to work late again. He gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and grabbed his jacket. "Don't wait up," he said softly. I forced a smile, nodding along. But my voice cracked as I replied, "I won't." The door clicked shut, and for the very first time, I didn't cry. Instead, I picked up my phone. My fingers were trembling as I opened the tracking app Daniel had once installed for our safety, just in case, he'd said. The irony of it all made my chest tighten. A little blue dot blinked on the screen. He wasn't at work. He was across town, near Claire's apartment. The world went silent. I just sat there, completely frozen for a moment, staring at that screen. Then, something inside of me shifted, a numb kind of strength I didn't even know I had. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and I drove. The city lights blurred through my tears. Each red light felt like an eternity. Each turn I made felt heavier than the last. By the time I finally reached Claire's building, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely put the car in park. I told myself I wouldn't go in, that I'd just wait, just see what happened. But then, the elevator doors opened and Daniel stepped out. He didn't see me at first. He was smiling, that same easy, charming smile he used to give me. And then his eyes met mine. That smile vanished instantly. Neither of us spoke a word. The hallway felt like a vacuum, just swallowing every sound. "Emily," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Don't," I said sharply. My voice cracked, but my eyes didn't leave his. "Don't you dare." Behind him, the apartment door opened. Claire appeared. Her face went completely pale the moment she saw me standing there. My voice dropped to a pained whisper. "Tell me this isn't real." Claire didn't answer. Tears welled up in her eyes, but no words came out. That silence, that awful, suffocating silence, was all the confirmation I needed. The next few moments were a complete blur. I remember Daniel reaching for me, saying something meaningless and desperate. I remember stepping back, shaking my head, and I remember my own voice, calm but hollow. "I gave you both everything I had." My sister, my best friend since we were children, couldn't even look at me. And Daniel, the man I had planned my entire life with, he just stood there, silent, guilty, and small. It felt like I was watching strangers wearing the faces of the people I loved most in the world. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just turned around and walked away. My heels echoed down the hallway. Each step was a heartbeat. Each breath was a goodbye. Outside, the cold night air hit me like a sheet of ice. I got into the car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, just trying to breathe. The city lights blurred again, but this time it wasn't from tears. It was just emptiness. I sat there for a long time, staring out at nothing. How long had this been happening? When did my home become a lie? When did my sister become a stranger? I drove home eventually, though I barely remember how I got there. When I walked inside, everything looked the same. The family photos on the wall, the faint scent of our life together, all the small details that used to mean love. But now, they all just screamed betrayal. I sat down on the couch, pulling a blanket around my shoulders, and I finally let myself break. The sound that came out of me wasn't quite a sob. It was something deeper than that. It was pure grief. Grief for the marriage that had just died, for the sister I had just lost, and for the version of myself that still believed in forever. When the tears finally stopped, I felt something new. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was clarity. I realized that betrayal doesn't just destroy relationships, it changes you. It takes away the light, the softness, the certainty you once had, and it replaces them with a heavy silence. And yet I could feel that beneath that silence, something else was beginning to grow. A tiny seed of strength, because even after losing everything, I was still standing. If you've ever felt a pain like this, please know you are not alone. It's okay to not be okay, and reaching out for support is a sign of incredible strength. There are people who can help you navigate these dark times. Thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more content on healing and finding your strength again. You are stronger than you think. The morning light crept through the curtains, painting soft gold lines across the living room floor. Emily hadn't slept. The clock ticked somewhere behind her, each second echoing too loudly in the quiet house. She sat on the couch, wrapped in the same blanket from the night before, still wearing yesterday's clothes. Yesterday's heartbreak. There's a strange calm after the storm, a stillness that feels almost cruel, because the world doesn't stop for your pain. It just keeps going. Cars passed outside, a bird chirped by the window, yet Emily's entire world had ended only hours ago. Her phone buzzed with messages she didn't read. Daniel had called several times. Claire too. She couldn't bring herself to answer either of them. There was nothing left to say. They'd already said everything that mattered through their actions. So instead, she stood up, walked to the mirror and looked at herself. Her reflection was unrecognizable. Red eyes, tangled hair, the ghost of someone who used to be alive inside. But behind that brokenness, there was something else. A flicker, a beginning. Later that day, Emily packed a small bag. Not because she had a plan, but because she couldn't stay. Every corner of that house whispered memories she didn't want to hear. Laughter, late-night talks, promises that now felt like lies. She slipped off her wedding ring and placed it on the counter. For a moment, she stared at it, the tiny circle that once meant forever. Then she turned and walked out the door. She drove aimlessly, past the park where they'd first met, past the coffee shop where Claire used to tease her about always being late. Everything around her felt like a photograph from another life. She rolled down the window and let the wind sting her face. It didn't feel like freedom. It felt like starting over on ashes. A week passed. Emily stayed at a small motel by the coast, a quiet, forgotten place where no one knew her name. She spent her mornings walking by the water, her evenings watching the horizon burn orange and fade to blue. The sea didn't judge. It just existed, vast, constant, indifferent. And in that silence, she began to feel something she hadn't in days. Breath. Grief has a way of stripping you down to nothing, but sometimes that's where you start to rebuild. One night, as she sat on the balcony, her phone lit up again. It was a message from Claire. Just a few words. "I'm so sorry. Please believe me. I never meant to hurt you." Emily read it twice, then she set the phone down and looked out at the waves. Forgiveness, it was such a beautiful word. But right then it felt impossible. How do you forgive someone who destroyed the foundation of who you are? She wrote a message back, then deleted it. Wrote another, deleted that one too. Finally, she typed something simple. "I hope someday you find peace, but don't look for it in me." And she hit send. The moment she did, she felt something shift. Small release, like a breath she'd been holding for years. Over the next few weeks, Emily began to live again. Little by little, she read books she hadn't touched in years. She painted again, filling blank canvases with colors that spoke where words couldn't. She smiled, not because the pain was gone, but because she was learning to exist alongside it. Healing wasn't a straight line. Some days she still woke up crying. Other days she felt light, almost free, and that was enough. Morning, she walked to the water's edge and stood there barefoot in the sand. The sun was just rising, and the world felt new. She closed her eyes and whispered, not to anyone, but to herself, "I'm still here." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, she realized, were enough. Maybe one day she'd love again. Maybe one day she'd even speak to her sister. But for now, she had herself. And after everything she'd lost, that felt like the most powerful thing in the world. Because sometimes, survival isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about learning to breathe through it. The seasons changed quietly. The days grew longer, the air warmer, and the shadows that once haunted my nights began to fade. Not disappear, but soften. It had been 3 months since that night in the hallway. 3 months since my world had fallen apart. I still remembered every detail, the look in Daniel's eyes, the way my sister Claire's voice had trembled, the crushing weight in my chest that made it so hard to breathe. But the pain no longer ruled me. It was there, yes, like a scar, permanent, but healed enough not to bleed anymore. I found a small apartment near the coast, a quiet place with chipped walls and sunlight that spilled across the floor each morning. It wasn't much, but it was all mine. I painted the walls myself, bought secondhand furniture, filled the rooms with plants, candles, and the scent of vanilla. For the first time in years, my space felt alive, not because of who I shared it with, but because it reflected who I was becoming. Every morning, I'd open the windows and let the sea breeze in. A gentle reminder that I was still here, still breathing. I started working again, freelance design, something I'd always loved, but had given up to support Daniel's business. Now, every single project I completed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I even started meeting new people, a small circle of artists, writers, and locals who gathered every weekend at a seaside cafe. They didn't know my story, not the whole truth, but they saw my smile, and they heard my laughter returning in pieces. Sometimes that was all that mattered. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in gold and lavender, I was painting outside. My neighbor, an older woman named June, stopped by. "You paint like someone who's lived 1,000 lives," she said gently. I managed a faint smile. "Maybe I have." June chuckled softly. "Pain can make for great art. But don't let it be your only muse, dear." Those words stayed with me long after she left. I realized she was right. I'd been creating from a place of loss, from the ache of what was taken from me. But maybe it was time to start creating from a place of hope instead. Later that week, I decided to do something I'd been avoiding for months. I opened a blank page and began to write. It wasn't an apology or a confession. It was a story. My story. I wrote about love and betrayal, about loss and rediscovery, about a woman who found strength in the ruins of her past. And with every word I typed, I felt lighter, as if I was finally releasing all the heavy pieces I had carried for so long. By the time I finished, it was past midnight. I read the final line aloud to myself, "Even broken hearts can learn how to beat again." And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I truly believed it. A few days later, a letter arrived. It was from Claire. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. Her handwriting was the same as it always was. Inside, there were no excuses, no justifications, just raw honesty. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote. "I just want you to know that I live with this every day. I miss my sister more than I can ever say." Tears filled my eyes. I sat with that letter for a long time, letting every word sink in. Then I took a deep breath, folded it gently, and placed it in a box with old photographs, a box I labeled yesterday. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I was finally ready to stop hating. In the weeks that followed, I started teaching art classes for children at the local community center. Their laughter, their paint-stained hands, their pure innocence, it brought me a kind of joy I didn't know I still had in me. One little girl asked me once, "Miss Emily, why do you always smile when you paint?" I paused, and a soft smile found its way to my face. "Because it reminds me that even broken things can be made beautiful again." The girl just nodded, as if she understood perfectly. And that night, as I stood by my window, watching the moon reflect over the vast, calm ocean, I whispered quietly to myself, "I made it." Not perfectly, not painlessly, but fully. Because in the end, life isn't about the people who break you. It's about the person you choose to become after they do, and after everything shows to become whole again. Thank you for being here and sharing this part of my journey. If this story resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd like this video and subscribe to the channel. It means the world to me. See you next time. A full year had passed. 12 months since that night that changed everything. Emily sometimes wondered how she had made it through the crying, the anger, the long nights where silence was louder than any sound. But when she looked around her small apartment now, she didn't see loss anymore. She saw growth, plants thriving in sunlight, paintings lining the walls, a woman reborn from the ashes of her own heartbreak. She still thought of them sometimes, Daniel and Claire. Not every day, not with pain, but with a distant ache that felt human, because healing didn't erase the past, it just made it easier to live with. On a quiet Sunday morning, Emily walked down to the ocean. It was early, the kind of morning when the world still feels half asleep. She carried her sketchbook, her coffee, and a calm heart. The tide was low, the sand cool under her feet. Waves whispered softly as if the sea itself was breathing with her. She sat on a smooth rock and began to draw. Not faces, not memories, but moments. The way sunlight touched the water. The curve of a distant sail. Quiet peace of being alone but not lonely. She thought about how much she had changed, how pain had once defined her, and now it had simply shaped her. She wasn't the same woman who had begged for answers, who had cried into her pillow until dawn. She was stronger, not hard, not bitter, just strong. Because sometimes, life breaks you to rebuild you differently. And the pieces that come back together aren't any the same, but they more real. That afternoon, while browsing a small bookstore by the pier, Emily found something unexpected. A small, worn journal with golden edges. On the first page, handwritten in elegant script, were the words, "What you survive becomes your story." She smiled. She bought the journal and decided she would start writing again. Not about the past, but about what came after. The laughter, the peace, the quiet victories. Because surviving was one thing, living again was another. A few weeks later, she received an email. They wanted to feature it in a collection about healing. Emily stared at the message for a long moment, her heart pounding softly. Then she laughed, a genuine, full laugh, the kind she hadn't heard from herself in years. Maybe this was life's way of saying, "You did it." That even from heartbreak, something beautiful can grow. That night, she stood once again on the balcony, overlooking the ocean. The air was cool, carrying the scent of salt and possibility. She closed her eyes and whispered, not to the past, not to Daniel or Claire, but to the future. "Thank you for breaking me, because now I know how to build myself." The wind carried her words out into the night. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was letting go. She felt like she was moving forward. She thought about the people who had loved her and the ones who had hurt her. She realized something profound. They all taught her something. Love taught her how to give. Betrayal taught her how to protect. Loneliness taught her how to stand. And time taught her how to heal. She was no longer defined by what happened to her. She was defined by what she chose to do after. As the moon rose, casting silver light across the waves, Emily opened her new journal and began to write, "My story didn't end when they broke me. It began when I decided to heal." She smiled, soft, genuine, free. And for the first time in forever, she wasn't thinking about what she'd lost. She was thinking about everything she still had left to find. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't anger, it's peace. And peace, true peace, had finally found her. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel for more stories of healing and hope.